Well, I'm going to see if I can make this all work. I'm really feeling very old because Corey Rosenlee was born in 1972. Andrea Eshelman was born in 74. Heck, I was teaching before they were born. Let me find out a little bit about you. How many of you were here when HSTA got started in 1971? How many of you plan to retire in the next 5 years? How many of you are in your first 5 years of teaching? I'm going to talk a little bit today about what we achieved in the past. In 1971, before Corey was born, we had 2 representational elections. And the reason we had 2 is because you had to make majority in order to win, and we missed majority by 42 votes. So we had a second rep election. And then we went right to the bargaining table with Governor Burns. He was very reluctant to bargain with the teachers. Though he signed the collective bargaining bill, he really didn't believe in it. So in order to get him to settle the contract, we called for a strike in 1972. And most people don't remember that strike. And after looking at the hands in the audience, I now know why. Because none of you were around. We struck for 4 hours before the governor finally settled the 72 contract. And then in 1972, September, when the governor refused to implement the contract, the teachers of Hawaii walked out. And we took another strike vote. The court said, naughty, naughty, naughty. You can't do that. And if you insist upon striking, we will fine HSTA $100,000 a day. And we will fine every teacher who strikes $10,000 a day for every day they're out. You think the court was serious? Yeah. Well, our board of directors, some of whom came to the meeting with their overnight bags packed, said, we'll take the $100,000 a day fine, but we can't ask every teacher to take a $10,000 a day fine. Because though we think we'll win in court, we can't put our teachers through that. So we called the strike off. And then we went back to the bargaining table, and this is the one that most people remember, the 73 strike. The ILWU was so worried about the 1973 strike that we were going to bring down Governor Burns, that they encouraged him to settle, and we agreed to send 4 unresolved issues to a process called MEDARP, with a mediator who would make a final decision. We were out 18 days, and the teachers were flexing their muscles. Interesting about the teachers in those days, 98% of our teachers were registered to vote. 95% of them voted. We made up 5% of the electorate. So any tight race, teachers could make a difference one way or the other. Now, the last data I've seen is 69% of teachers are registered to vote, and only half of them vote. Everyone in this room better be registered to vote, because that's where part of the power comes from, is your ability to elect legislators or defeat legislators. Did you guys see the video? Did they see the video? After. Well, you're going to see a video after that lists all the gains that we've had, but I want to focus on one in particular, duty-free lunch periods. The IRS stopped the duty-free lunch periods. President Nixon had put in a wage limit of 5.5%. And because your lunch periods went from unpaid to paid, for all of you youngsters in this room, which is most of you, teachers' lunch periods were outside the day, so the actual school day was 7.5 hours long, and that half hour was unpaid. We put it into the workday, and IRS said that's a pay raise. And the limit on pay raises was 5.5% each year for 2 years, so you've exceeded the president's limits, so you can't do it. With the help of Patsy Mink, and on Oahu, I asked everybody, do you remember Patsy Mink? And everybody went, no. Representative Patsy Mink arranged for a meeting with the Wage and Price Stabilization Board in Washington, D.C., and we sent a young probationary teacher, probies, listen, a young probationary teacher to Washington to argue our case before the Wage and Price Stabilization Board. And he won. And IRS said you can have your duty-free lunch periods. By the way, if you ever run into an income tax agent by the name of R.A. Jones, run. Because he's the one that made the determination, and Jim Williams and I had our taxes deeply audited for the next 3 years, because he was pissed that we beat him. You can also ask thank a teacher by the name of Mitty Reguindon. Mitty was a Central District teacher, and she went to her principal and she said, I'm taking my duty-free lunch period, I don't care what IRS says. And the principal said, well, I'm going to have to suspend you. She said, well, go ahead and suspend me, I've got HSTA behind me. And he said, oh, okay, in that case, I won't suspend you. I wonder how many of us would have told our principals, I'll take the suspension. We won 85% of our arbitrations. And that's important because that means the employer needs to understand that if he's going to violate the contract, we're going to fight it. And field reps, we didn't use attorneys for arbitrations. People like Tom Perry and Wilbert Hoke, all the UNISERV directors handled the arbitrations. And we got so good at it that the state started bringing in the deputy attorney generals to handle the state's arbitrations. And you know what? The UNISERV directors beat them too. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Our polling said that 25% of a teacher's classroom time was taken up in student discipline. And we ran a program called Hawaii Schools That Achieve. It was federally funded by the US Justice Department. But we also said maybe kids don't know how to behave in school. They don't know what's expected of them. So we asked the PTSA, the HGA, the State Student Council, the Board of Education, the department, and ourselves, and we sat down and we created a student code of conduct. That student code of conduct is in the school code, and every student is supposed to get a copy of it at the beginning of every school year. And if your school doesn't do that, trot your hot little body into the principal and say, you're supposed to do that. Because there's a community commitment that that's the way kids are supposed to behave in school. We put the evaluation instrument and the evaluation process into the contract so the employer couldn't change them. Nobody in this room remembers the Form 650 and 651. Does it sound familiar? It was a stupid checklist that your principal simply checked off. He could do it in his office. He didn't even have to come in and see you. But we said teachers want something to say about their evaluation and how it's done. So we put it into the collective bargaining agreement. One of the areas that we're most proud of is we were the first union in the state of Hawaii, public or private, to negotiate sick leave for maternity purposes. Up to that time, a woman who was pregnant had to leave at the beginning of the 4th month, take a leave without pay, and stay out on leave without pay until the next full semester. So you had to talk to your husband or wife about when she should get pregnant because it could be very expensive. So we used sick leave for maternity. We negotiated a sick leave bank so people with extra sick leave could put it in the bank for other people to use. That's still in existence today. We negotiated leave sharing. And some of you have done that in your schools, I know. You have a teacher who is seriously ill, is running out of sick leave, so people at the school can donate their sick leave to him or her. That came out of your collective bargaining agreement. And HSTA was voted by public opinion polls, at least 10 of them, to be the best public and private sector union in the state. You were very admired people because you were tough and you knew how to stick together. Then in 2001, 99% of the teachers went out on strike. 99%. We were talking on the plane. Give yourself a hand. I was talking to Mitzi coming over here. She was at Campbell High School, and they had a guy at Campbell who used to wave at the picketers with his tennis racket because he wasn't striking. He did not last at Campbell, I think, more than another year. And he had his Mercedes car washed on the school campus until we told the principal, you get him to stop that, and we got it done. We got a 14% pay raise over each year for 14% pay raise over 2 years, 7% each year for the 2-year period of time. And things after 2001 kind of settled in until we ran into Neil Abercrombie. We kind of tripped over Neil. You know. Why did this all happen? It's because teachers clearly understood the need for unity. You know, when I got started, the governor's people, John Burns's people said, teachers won't strike. Hawaii's teachers are different. They're mostly women, and we know women won't strike. Nothing like pissing off a group of women. Yeah. And then they used the argument, all the women teachers were second incomes, and so why would they strike for more money? Because they didn't need it. Those are all the crap I used to hear. So when we went out on strike, nobody was more surprised than the state's bargaining team. We told them we put something in the water. Teachers understood that the number of members made a difference. We would go to the bargaining table and they would tell us how many teachers were in every step in class. Because they said, that's how you vote, right? You figure out how many people. We said, no. Our teachers at the lower end of the schedule are as concerned about what happens at the upper end, and the upper end is as concerned of what happens at the lower end. Teachers understood that if they could say they were HSTA members, they carried a certain cachet and a certain level of importance. Henry Ford, who was not one of the great humanitarians, I don't know if you know the history of Henry Ford, but he was probably one of the biggest racists in the United States. I didn't own a Ford automobile for years because of that. In the city of Dearborn, outside of Detroit, you could only be a Protestant Caucasian in order to buy or live in the community. The great irony is the largest community of Arab Americans is now in Dearborn, Michigan. I could just hear Henry just turning over. But there were moments when he could say something of wisdom. And one was, coming together is a beginning. And that's what happened. We came together in 1971. Keeping together is progress. And we've stayed together. And working together is success. In the next few months, you're going to hear a court case, and Corey's going to talk a little bit about it. And it's going to challenge everybody in this room to stay together. Because we don't want to lose what other people fought for. And by the way, if you have older teachers, retired teachers, people who walked the picket line in 73, in 72, 73, thank them. The beginning teacher salary when they got started was $7,100. In the end of this contract, it'll be $50,123. When we got started, we had 9,700 teachers. We now have 13,006. We don't want to lose that. So remember the words of Henry Ford and stay together. Thank you.